physical violence that comes with it in terms of maybe slapping, beating, and other forms of physical assaults. But in recent time, experiences have shown that, experiences as well as people's narrative have shown that it goes or it transcends these seemingly mundane definition of gender-based violence. So it could be emotional and it could also be financial. For instance, the intentional acts of withdrawing financial funds from, let's say, your spouse or a female under your control is also a form of violence. And just like Toby said earlier on, gaslighting too is also a form of violence. So GBV extends beyond the physical to incorporate the emotional, the verbal, as well as the financial. Now, women are most often the victims of violence, of gender-based violence, because in many societies of the world, women are considered weaker than men. And I think biologically, women want to agree that the genetic makeup of women is not as strong as that of men. So because women are weaker strength-wise or physically, they tend to be victims of violence. In addition to that, our sociocultural belief and practices that believe that women are beneath men and that women are objects of men's control, as well as the cultural practices that consider men as dominant than women, make women the victim of violence. So naturally, if you feel you are above anyone else, it's almost normal for you to want to control them in any ways that you can. So I also like to add that GBV is a means through which men control women and put them in their place. But as much as women are most often the victims of GBV, men are also victims. At least recent narratives have shown the extent to which that can be true. So men could be victims of violence. Women are also victims of violence, but women are much more victims of GBV. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So how do we recognize this in Africa? How do we know that these people experiencing violence in Africa? But I know you kind of mentioned the various forms that it could be, but then what are like the glaring examples that this person is definitely experiencing GBV?
Yeah, okay. So of course, the glaring example is the marks on the body, telltale signs of the fact that someone is suffering real violence, like maybe a swollen eye, swollen cheeks. At least the face is the most visible part of the body. But of course, it could also be bodily marks like K marks and other kind of marks on the body. But again, that could only be visible in cases of physical violence. So if the violence, for instance, is financial, emotional, there's no point. In fact, the woman, for instance, that is now I am assuming that the woman is a victim of the violence here. The woman will not have any evidence that her husband is violent towards her because nobody can actually see what she's doing, what he's doing to her, or how she's feeling. Okay. And in instances of gaslighting, for instance, it only takes someone that knows the couple very well to know that she's suffering or she's a victim of whatever kind of violence the man is perpetrating, as far as it is not physical. So in Africa, once again, sometimes you can never tell. And of course, victims of violence too sometimes lie to cover up their spouses. Maybe out of shame, sometimes out of fear, or even the stigma of being considered or regarded as a victim of that kind of violence.
Or even a stereotype, stereotype of that person's experience that kind of thing would allow someone not to say it out or cover for this part.
Yeah, sometimes the fear of what people would say, like, of course, and again, I think in most societies, so if a woman is a victim of violence, people almost always blame her. The conversations around victim blaming always comes up like, oh, you should learn to shut up. You shouldn't talk back when he's talking. Keep quiet when he's talking, or do what he asks you to do. So in order to avoid being blamed, most people keep quiet, right? And then they cover up for it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bisola, do you want to go next?
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Yes. I would definitely love to share my thoughts at this point. So thank you for inviting me. I do not take this opportunity for granted. Please call me Bisola Miriam or BM for short, but not baby mama. Thank you for the great introduction, and thank you, Dr. Helen, if I said that correctly, for taking the bull by the very horn, because it's not easy to go first. So I would like to approach my response from this lens. So first of all, I would refer to anyone who is either in, these kind of situations or who has left as a survivor. I would not be using the word victim. Secondly, I would also love to center, I would love to center my trauma-informed practice in this conversation, and also just center my thoughts from a broader sense of what violence is, and particularly the societal, patriarchal, or just historical implication of, GBV, broadly speaking. And I think the very question you have for us is, how does this happen, right? Or what gender is mostly affected? So for me, in approaching this question, I would say that we cannot even begin to have conversation about gender-based violence or any forms of violence without first understanding the history of a community, a people, a group, or an institution. Because this whole idea of violence or any behavior in itself is not something that happens without a pre-cause, or like there is always a root cause to every social behavior or to every problem in a given society. But I wouldn't want to bore us with with all of that detail regarding how does, gender-based violence and whatnot occur. But I think I would rather want to speak broadly from the sense of domestic violence, right? Because for me, I think gender-based violence can be often misconstrued or misunderstood to be if the violence that only involves, women, or generally women in intimate relationships. But we'll talk about this kind of violence. In my case, I would use the word domestic violence for the most part of this conversation. And I think two things that I would just love to share before I wrap up my thought is, number one, that there's a role in which childhood experiences or childhood trauma plays in further creating a society where there is continuous violence. And there's a role in which political systems, colonialism or neocolonialism, or, setups of society have to play in creating families where violence becomes, a pattern. And I think so for me, that's just like a general, information that I would love to share. But having said that, I think it's also important that we talk here about the many forms and shapes and sizes of domestic violence. So the adults are not often the ones who get affected by this kind of menace, just like our leader earlier shared, Mr. Toby. Children get impacted, right? And the homes or the families isn't the only place where violence occurs. Other, structures within the society, like the workspace, corporate organization, or just everyday spaces where more than one people interact. Social media is not often talked about as and it has become a major tool or weapon that is used today to perpetrate violence and abuse. In addition to that, there is also the role in which traditional systems like the educational systems, religious organizations all play in perpetuating violence and abuse. So I think in instituting this conversation and talking about violence, domestic violence, GBV, there are so many institutions that aid and abet the continuous reoccurrence of domestic violence. And I think that's one thing I would love to like have everyone take away from my point today. And secondly, there's the role in which childhood experiences or patterns or trauma play in further creating a system or a society where violence continues to occur. And more often than not, there are other non-traditional systems like social media or new media where violence continues to occur, or even corporate organizations or other settings where violence continues to be perpetuated and often gets sidelined in these kinds of conversations about domestic violence. And lastly, there's a role in which these institutions, especially the non-traditional, traditional ones, there's a role in which they play in ideology promotion, in mind control, in selling narratives that then perpetuate violence in families, among individuals, groups, and organizations. So I think there's the mind at work. There's the game of controlling the mind, of selling certain beliefs or promoting certain cultural practices. And so when we continue to perpetuate certain beliefs or promote certain cultures or practices, there is definitely going to be a continuous trend of perpetuation of violence and abuse. So it's not just enough to continue to talk about, oh, what are the symptoms or the signs and the ways to get people out of these experiences. But inherently, when you have cultures or beliefs or just, systems that perpetuate these kinds of very violent patterns or way of lives, then it becomes really complex. And I think it's important to unpack that on its own, and also the role of trauma in GBV, DV, or IPV, depending on which of the terms we all are familiar with. So that would be my thought for now.
Thank you so much. I like that you went back to tell us like the real cause of it. So families have a role, the society have a role, and institutions have a role. Thank you so much. That was insightful. Okay, Toyosi, please tell us your thoughts.
Thank you, Joanna. Thank you, everybody. It's nice to meet you all. I think they've said it all, Dr. Ellen and Miriam. I'll just add that some uncommon forms are also, like when Miriam was talking about traditional practices, I know widow rights in Nigeria, widowhood right in Nigeria, and also for other type of people that experience violence. I would say the LGBTQ communities, because of their non-conformance to traditional gender roles and sexual orientations. So and that is not a conversation we're having in Nigeria yet. Due to the Constitution. So yeah. Also, when we look at Miriam was talking about domestic violence, and why we have sexual abuse happening within intimate relationship, like Dr. Ellen stated, we also have sexual violence in marginalized community. Because the reason why I don't know if I should jump to my work yet. The only reason why I decided to do I Won't Mind My Business was because of what Miriam talked about, the social media space. Like every time I come on social media, I see a lot of, sorry, 1 minute, my son is. I'm so sorry. So
no need to apologize. You're a mom.
So, and I noticed that there's always this high influx of reports on children, especially because that's my own focus. I also I did something with Yaba, the issue happening in Yaba, where women, when they walk through the market, they are being grouped by men. We did that as well, but I was more particular about the children because I was like, how can, and I will mention this person in particular, Ochaya Ogbanje, how can a girl be molested sexually abused for 3 years, from the age of 8 years to 11, before she died of fistula disease? How can nobody know about it? Like, what are the, and I think Joanna already asked the question when she started, like, what are the signs, you know? Like, so I was just, that was really going on in my head, like, nobody, let's say even in her household, what about when she goes to school, a teacher, is there no signs? What are the signs to look out for? So yeah, I feel like, so apart from the physical signs that Dr. Ellie mentioned, how do we navigate the, you know, the uncommon sides we don't see? That's
Like the emotional ones. How are we supposed to know?
Because an 8-year-old being molested by 2 people, these are conversations people don't want to act at. But like, how would this girl, what will her emotional state be? Are there signs where, you know how they say we do this test in school now, for awareness, right? From trauma informed skills, where they say sometimes it's just how quiet the person, someone that you know is always chatty, and suddenly she keeps to herself. Somebody needs to ask questions. So yeah, so those are I'm more particular about the uncommon or the conversations people don't want to have about it. So that's my understanding of gender-based violence. And to continue to not mind our business. Because I've read publications where people would say that things like they just wanted to mind their business, you know, and I'm like, I won't mind my business. And we need to raise 911 agents in Nigeria. How do we raise 911 agents? Because we don't have the system though, but we can have active bystanders that are able to like call out this heinous acts, especially marginalized communities, you know. So another thing I think I'm jumping to, because they've already said everything about gender-based violence. So I'll just say this also, that another problem is this whole traditional respecting your elders. Because when I read this publication, I see something like the victor, or Miriam, you said we will not be calling them victims. Survivor, yeah. So when the survivor said the perpetrator actually threatened to tell her mom, and I'm like, the situation of things where a survivor is told that if you don't keep quiet, I'll report to your mother. How are we raising our kids for our survivors or the children to believe a perpetrator over their own parents? You know, this keep quiet, because you didn't explain to yourself, they've slapped you. Those are the parts where I'm always, when we do this theater initiative, that's where we're trying to unpack, you know, where a child will believe a perpetrator over their own parents, that if I don't keep quiet, if you don't do what I ask you to do, I'll report you to your mom. And they believe that over their own parents, you know. And that's where you begin to see all this respect, this traditional, you keep quiet when an elder is talking, even though the elder is trying to, you know, do this very terrible, horrible thing. So it's a lot. Yeah, I think I'll stop now.
Thank you. I think Ellen wants to say something.
Yeah, I just realized that most of our responses are geared towards domestic violence, right? But so far we've not talked about the violence again, GBV violence in public spaces, that is in spaces outside the house, especially in spaces that one would think would be safe because there are lots of people there. And specifically now I'm talking about spaces and spaces such as motor parks, restaurants, recreational centers, and even shows and event centers. So early this year and late last year, I spent a number of months working on street harassment in Lagos motor parks. And then I was amazed at the result I found. Now, it's still violence, right? But this time around, rather than it be between like two persons who probably live in the same house or the same environment, public space violence happen to women, and it is perpetrated by strangers, especially male strangers. So why we've been able to clarify that domestic violence, that women are almost often the victims of domestic violence. When it comes to public space violence, women are always the victims. Like men are rarely victims of public space violence, because there's this thing about women's bodies that attracts the male attention and makes men want to wield their power and authority over the women. So I realized that the way men react towards women's bodies do not only stem from our social-cultural perception of women and women's bodies, but it also comes from men's maybe paternalistic nature or behavior, attitude towards women. Men always feel like they are in a position of authority to dictate how women should appear in public spaces, how women should behave, and the kind of places they should go to. In addition to that, men have also categorize public spaces as their own space. So as a woman, if you are going there, you have to do according to their dictates. And again, it still comes back to our society. So our society has already, should I say, relegated women to the home front. So even though there's a lot of improvement, there's great improvement, like so much so that women are working, women are now occupying managerial and top position in companies and firms. Women are still second-class citizens in their spaces. And then in public spaces too, it's always like that. That is why a woman, a female, a woman, a girl, for instance, would always be castigated by choosing to dress in a particular way, choosing to wear her hair in a particular way. Like, I'm sure there are some places in Nigeria I will go to with the color of my hair and I could get into trouble. I could get unwarranted male attention because of the color of my hair. They could feel that maybe I'm loose. That is why number one, I'm red, and then the color of my dread is red. Well, I can get away with this because I'm in the US and nobody really cares what you do. But in Nigeria, and if I was working, there was no way I would have been able to get away with what I'm wearing right now. So men always feel they're in authority over, they have authority over women's bodies. And this is one of the big problems we have. So of superiority about women, the issue of violence will never desist in our society.
Thank you. Even apart from public spaces, I was just remembering also workplaces also, when you have dominant boss, stuff like that. And even in the US, I don't know, there was stuff I saw on the internet. There are this kind of hair that are accepted as acceptable in the workplace, and this our African hair is so out of it. In some organizations here in the US, it's like maybe they relaxed rating hair, that's like their type of hair. But then maybe because we're still in school, we're still in like an institution that is always preaching equity, diversity, and inclusion, maybe we can still like get away with that. But yeah. Yes, Bisola, please go ahead.
Yeah, just wanted to add this quick thoughts. I think one of the things that I think everyone is just re-echoing in many different ways, some of the things we've all talked about, but like just adding on new information and new layers of context and all of that. I think maybe it was Helen or Toyosi who said something about beliefs, right? And I think you, Joanna, you've also spoken to that a little bit. So there's a question I see in the chat about how do we develop the trauma-informed skills. Before I talk about that very quickly, I'm still going to go back to the traditional African system or the traditional African society. I am not a major of African studies, but from what I know from stories that were handed down to us, because African society has its own system of gathering data or doing research or collecting information. And one of that is storytelling, right? And the stories that I grew up to hear about most African setting or most African families is different from what we have today, or the way in which these systems were initially created. They have changed owing to many things, like the introduction of new religions and the introduction of new political systems, all that we can attribute to colonialism primarily. And at a point in my life, I sat down when I became so involved in, personally, I am a survivor, and I have always had this very destructive way of thinking about, one, the person of God, two, the role of the woman, and three, the place of the woman or anyone in any society. And I think let's unpack this a little bit. There's a role in which faith or belief plays in how we treat every human in a given society. And religious beliefs come from somewhere. They either come from the introduction of a new culture in a new community or in a new society, or perhaps they come from, a group of missionaries or people who go to a new place and offer them help in exchange for salvation, or in exchange for believing a certain religion or faith or doctrine. And when we sit down and get very honest and very critical with ourselves and begin to look at ways in which religion, and new beliefs that have entered into the African space, and really ask ourselves, how have these different beliefs or religions, how have they changed the traditional African system? Now, I'm not even talking about the makeup of families. I'm talking more particularly the roles and the respect or the reverence that we give to one gender over the other. And when I moved to the US, one of the things that I also found is that historically, Black women were revered in many Black homes and families, historically. But of course, given to slavery and many other political forces that are against society, the Black woman became associated with something that is close to demonic or close to, anti-progress, anti-good. And so there's a lot that has happened to us as a people from, in terms of how our mindsets we have been manipulated. Let me use that word. We have been manipulated for so long. We have been turned against each other, especially as Black people. And we can only get it right, particularly how we treat women, how we treat one gender over the other, if we unpack our beliefs, disrupt or, disassociate ourselves with certain patterns that have allowed violence to continue to remain. And I think one of the that's respecting authority unnecessarily, which religion has also given allowed to thrive, is honor your father and your mother so that your days can be long. This person is the head of the family. And these are things that were not real. We had a system within the African space that was more collaborative, partnership focused than what we have come to have today. And whether we like it or not, we cannot really change a people or a system, or even reduce the rate of violence and abuse in our community if we first do not change our beliefs and our mindsets. Because think about it this way. There's this general saying that I've heard so many times, maybe you all have heard it, which is, words become thoughts, thoughts become actions, actions becomes goals or behavior or something, right? And so there is a way in which behaviors are formed. Behaviors don't get formed from people just falling from heaven. People form their behavior from observing, from living in context and existing in spaces. I imagine that many of us, before we moved to the US, probably had a very strong anti-queer perspective, anti-LGBTQ perspective. But living in another space exposes you to, oh, wow, this is how much suffering this group of people still had to face for being who they are. And I think sometimes there's really no one way to like really unpack this issue or say this is how we solve this problem. But overall, if there is mindset shift or there's a change in the behavior of people, which of course does not happen overnight, which often requires a lot of hard work and due diligence, then I think we are on the path to ending this social problem, even if it is by 1% globally. Lastly, what skills do we require? We can't even talk about skills or about trauma-informed skills if people are not ready to have a change of mindsets. And so people can learn all the skills in this world if there is a total contrast. I mean, if there is a strong contradiction between what is being taught, and what is believed, or what people inherently think is right. There's nothing that can even be done. There's no amount of trauma-informed skill that people can deploy that can work. It's just the case of you go to a community, you give the children books to study when they don't even have food to eat. It's a case of putting round pegs in a square hole, if you get my analogy. So at the end of the day, we can solve a problem by taking one framework from one different community and take it into another community where you know that there's a way in which this system has functioned historically. And if we can trace our steps back to our roots, I believe we're on the path to designing trauma-informed framework or approach or solution that is grounded in a particular society's culture and history.
Thank you. Like at least one thing I know we can take on today is that we need to revisit our culture, we need to revisit our beliefs, we need to revisit our norms, we need to come against all these negative stereotypes that that limits people from becoming their their full potential. So let me go to the next question. This one is for you, Helen. How do intersecting forms of oppression, such as sexism, racism, and ableism, compound GBV in Africa? I know you kind of talked on the sexism already, but you can just talk on it generally in relation to oppression and also alongside racism and ableism. So I'll read it again. How do intersecting forms of oppression, such as sexism, racism, and ableism, compound GBV in Africa?
And so just like we all said before, right, there's a problem with our culture and sociocultural practices. So what we believe about, our belief about gender shape the practices we imbibe about gender. And again, as much as our cultural practices is the problem, the root of the problem is colonialism. Right? If you're familiar with Oyerumi's mention of gender, we agree with me that Nigeria at least had a sane gender. In fact, there was no gender stratification in Nigeria until colonialism. So colonialism created the gender stratification and also added all forms of gender discrimination to many African societies. And since then, just like human beings do, human beings make things better than they were supposed to initially. So many African societies, including Nigerian society, took that upon themselves to extend it beyond what is normal. So today, we have many practices that do not consider women as important or as good as men. That is not to say women are not considered important persons or an important gender in many of our societies. Like women are appreciated as mothers, as caregivers, as nurturers, as the gender that takes care of the home and takes care of the child and the rest of all that. However, women's successes women's responsibilities, women's abilities, women's intelligence are still considered subservient, less than, inferior to that of men, right? So in addition to our sociocultural practices and belief on gender is also what we think about people with disabilities. Again, in many of our African and Nigerian societies, we believe that disability is a punishment from God on the parents and sometimes on the individual. In addition to that, people also believe that disability is a message from God, or the person with a disability is representing something diabolical or spiritually bad, that anybody that associates with such a person would end up like the person, or the demonic, or like we say in Nigeria, the village people that are following that person will start following you when you associate yourself with them. So at the end of the day, it still goes back to our cultural beliefs and cultural practices. And most often than not, I'm appalled that with the level of exposure that we have, a lot of people are still insensitive and as well as unknowledgeable about how to treat people, how to talk to people. Earlier on, we've been able to ascertain that violence, for instance, goes beyond physical. It incorporates emotional. So how you talk to people, how you address people goes a long way in dictating or spelling out the kind of person that you are. So if, again, like BM and Toyosi have said so far, this idea of the respect we accord to our elderly people and the rest, it causes a lot of problem for us. If we can get to a point where we can call our elders out on their bullshits and let them know this behavior is not appropriate, it's not right. If we can tell them, of course, politely, of course, or as polite as we can be, that certain beliefs and practices is no longer tenable in our present society. And then if we can decide not to mind our business, like Toyosi rightly said, things will get better. Okay. Sometimes people say, Helen, you have a big mouth, must you talk? But the thing is, if I decide not to talk, you decide not to talk, everyone else decides not to talk, certain people will continue to suffer. You know, I told a friend of mine recently, I think on my CV, we had a conversation about people with disabilities here in the year. I was telling her that maybe again, because I'm in a university environment or university community, many of the persons with disability that I've seen are highly functional. And we don't have this in Nigeria. People with disability in Nigeria are helpless people. The majority of them are uneducated, except maybe they come from a very wealthy home. They are nothing to write them about. And that is why we have a lot of beggars on our street, because nobody cares about them. But here you see them highly functional, they have jobs. You understand? They hold position, they go to school. In fact, one of my classmates is a disabled person. He's so disabled that he said he needs help to get dressed and the way, but he's doing a master's in women, gender, and sexuality studies. So we just need to flow with globalization. A lot of things are changing. So until we incorporate ourselves in the world, until we decide to change, and that is the problem. Nobody likes change. We don't want to change, but this change is a good change. It's not a bad change. So therefore, it's something that we should all invite. It's something we should all work hard towards. And the fact still remains that whether we like it or not, for instance, I can't say much about racism because again, we don't have racism in Nigeria. What we have is ethnicity. So if we are going to talk about ethnicity, that is also going to open up a lot. And at the end of the day, it still boils down to kindness. Like if I am kind and you are kind, like I told a friend of mine yesterday, if we always put ourselves in people's shoes, we will not be mean to other people. We will not say mean things or do mean acts towards them. If I can say, if this girl or this guy tells me this, I'll feel very bad. So why should I do the same to them? What we be a better place. So irrespective of whether you are able, disabled, you're a male, you're a female, you're uneducated, you belong to one tribe or the other. Everybody counts, everybody is important, irrespective of your gender, your race, your class, your sex, or whatever it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. I just remember what you said about telling others to put themselves in others' shoes. Like that was the same thing I told my students on Friday. I lead this discussion on a book on viral justice, How We Build the World We Want by Laura Benjamin. And like these are all the talks that we talk about. Little act of kindness. That will like definitely inform how we treat others if we can. And there are these two terms, cultural competency, cultural humility. I don't know if Toyosi is familiar with those two terms. Like, okay, now talking about racism, when we try to understand where these people are coming from, when we try to understand their cultures, when we try to understand stuffs about them, then we'll be able to treat them better. And that's cultural humility. No, cultural humility is you saying, okay, I don't understand this person's culture, I don't understand this person's traditions. I am not colorblind. I see your color, because what they say here is some of them will say they're colorblind. They treat blacks as equally as they treat whites, which isn't even right. You shouldn't treat black the same way you treat whites, because we blacks, structures and systems that are put in place for us here, they are not the same as that of the white. Whites are more privileged. There's white supremacy and stuff like that. So as a white person, when you say you don't see color, that is even like out of it. You should see color. And this is where cultural humility comes into play, saying, I see you, I see color. And then cultural competency is you willing to learn that's people's traditions, that's people's culture, just to be able to treat them better. Um, Bisala and Teresi, do you have anything to say on what Helen just shared with us? No? Okay, BM. Okay, go ahead.
So very quickly, I think I really enjoyed like the thoughts that Miss Helen shared. I mean, like 1000% on board with those thoughts. And I think one thing that I just want to echo is like sometimes we need to FUCK this old elder, the idea of this person is older, like FUCK this old bullshit. Because at the end of the day, this old thing called respect, it has never served any society that is looking to progress and that is interested in ensuring that its people or our people or their people are kept safe. And when we continue to, in the name of respect, which in itself has been put in religion to create manipulation and further endanger humans, it's a deliberate attempt. And I think I can't scream this enough. I cannot shout this enough. When we begin to say, you know what, let's question some of the things that we've been taught in our churches and mosques or even in our, traditional religious spaces. Let's question these things, because when we begin to question these beliefs, then we're saying that we as a human that God has created in God's image and likeness will have superior intelligence over whatever it is that some people may have tinted, colored, or changed in order to promote a certain narrative that is not in any way compared to the superior intelligence that God has given us as humans. And I think when we begin to see, now what makes us see some other people lesser than us is also the same thing that certain religious practices or beliefs have perpetuated. Because when you start thinking, look at what they've done to us. I say this all the time. We have been sold a particular identity of God. And when you really sit down and reflect critically, this identity this image of this is what God looks like. That's one root cause of the many sufferings of many communities or groups of people. And so that's among many other things. And how can we even begin to talk about change when we need to be disrespectful, really, honestly. Sometimes we need to be disrespectful to get things done. We need to say that, you know what, I have superior intelligence. My head is on my neck. I am smart enough to know what I am doing. And don't come tell me in the name of trying to manipulate me that this is good for me. And I think when we raise kids, young adults, and go into spaces and really educate our people to what, really understand how important the next human is over systems and beliefs and structures that we have created, then we're on that path to a more just, sane, and stable society.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you. Just like Teosi said before, it's like what the most important thing is the child, because that's like the root of everything. How do we raise a child? Do we raise them to to cower down because of authority? Do we raise them to? I remember in as an undergrad, I had this she's like my sister, but because our families were close, and because she was just 3 years older than me, and when we're in the same level, 100 level, we're in the same hostel, Queen's Hall, we're in the same faculty in UI. And then she would just want me to attach auntie to her name, call me auntie, don't call me by my name. And I'm like, I don't even see you like that. I see you as my peer, as my mate. I know throughout those 4 years in school, it was always an issue. And not just for me, even for my friends. Like when my friends greet her, she just like give us this look like and even like my friends in class, like most of my friends are like older than me, but then you wouldn't know because we call each other by names, and we relate well with each other. But she would like behave in such a way to us just because I refused to call her by that auntie. And this it's I want to say it traumatized me, but then it's like when I think of it, it just like gave me, I couldn't like flow with things when I try to remember stuffs that, because me, I'm like a friendly person, and I wouldn't like want someone to treat me like that, like someone I think highly of, and then just because of these Yoruba cultural stuff, cultural traditions and beliefs that you must place auntie because someone is older than that kind of thing. And I'm happy because my parents didn't train me to be afraid of people. If I can't like speak to you and tell you that no, I can't, no, why would you tell me to do this? I would rather not conform to what you have said. And when I told my dad, he was happy that I stood my ground, and I didn't call her my auntie. And I'll tell you, like, this didn't die down. Like, there was this issue was among us from as an undergrad until I gave birth to my first child. And that was like when it eventually settled. And then when it got settled by an elder, she was like, "Oh, she did that in the past, and she didn't know it bothered me, that kind of thing." And I'm like, "You did it to me." I'm like the recipient of this. Like when people do an action, they kind of forget. But the people who receive that action will never forget. Will never forget. And I'm so raising my kids that one will not call the other one auntie or sister or brother. No, they will call each other by names. They will call each other by names. And it's not, and that doesn't mean they would disrespect each other, because you don't even, it's not the younger that needs to respect the elder. You don't have to say the younger should respect the elder, or the elder also should be able to respect the younger. And it's not just by age. There are many things we should respect each other for. Having, like, putting that assertiveness in your child, making them to be like articulate, to say no, despite all of these challenges, you can like keep going. I think this is when children will start saying no to gender violence, and they will start to speak up. They will start. I can remember. I don't know where I was reading it or watching it from, there was this ministry that they are also into rescuing kids from abusive parents, stuff like that. And there was this particular girl, I can't remember how old she was, and they discovered that she was being maltreated by her father, and her mother was aware. And by the time they called her mother, called her to, the mother was covering up for the father. Some stuff we've said before. And we're like, no, 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 the father didn't do that, or he did that because of this, he did that because of that. And this particular mother, she didn't allow this ministry to intervene. And the child eventually died because the child had to go back home and the father kept eating her and she eventually died. If this child had been assertive as to run away from home, who knows, she might not have died. So I think it all boils down to us raising our kids to be who they ought to be, to be able to stand up in society. And my daughter, I tell my daughter, I'm like, you are in a white man's land though. You are black, please. I try to kind of reduce her assertiveness, but I know I know she will grow up to be the kind of person that would not allow herself to be looked down or to be stamped down, because for her, maybe I don't think they know what being white or what being brown is for now. Although she would come and tell me, "Mommy, I'm brown. This one is white." I think they're teaching them that kind of thing in school now. But I know tomorrow when someone like tries to like bully her, I'm sure she would do that also, just to say, no, you can't do this for me. You can't do this to me. And I think having to be assertive, and even if you don't have like kids of our own, any child we are opportunity to mentor, any person we are opportunity to just tell that, please don't let others look down on you. You are more than this. I think doing that, we go a long way as to reduce gender-based violence. So to the next question, this one is for BM and Toyosi. So in what ways do traditional beliefs and customs about gendered roles in African societies silence or dehumanize victims of GBV? Then I'm probably going to post this on the chat. How can we unpack these beliefs and customs through community facing initiatives, or let's say community engagements? Let me post it here so everyone can see it. So in what ways do traditional beliefs and customs about gendered roles in African societies silence or dehumanize victims of GBV? Then how can we unpack these beliefs and customs through community-facing initiatives? Any of you can go first, Bisola or Toyose.
I see that Bisola want me to go first. I'll say that I think Dr. Eileen started about the patriarchy norms and how it's a traditional, even fine, it's in Western culture, it's the same as traditional culture, right? Even though I know Yerunke said that the Western belief, we called it word sense. And whenever she wants to talk about the traditional belief, she said we should use word sense, not word view, because word view is tend to be seen as Western ideologies. But I feel like there are still a lot of cultural, religious beliefs that was perpetuating gender violence, even in Africa, like the one we mentioned, the FGM, female mutilation. I think stigma and shame is another traditional belief. We have this culture of silence, right? Where even when you go to your mom, imagine a girl that decide to speak up and go to her mom, that mommy, this happened to me, and the mom is still saying, because of you'll be stigmatized. Let's keep it under the family. I think you've also mentioned that. Then there are also harmful practices within our traditions, like the child marriage, even when sharing property, they give the male 80%, that's still violence. They will say when men are talking, women should keep quiet. All of these are cycle of perpetuating violence in communities. And we don't talk about widowhood rights enough. It's another form, because when a woman dies, they don't say men to come and do all of those things. So we know these are still within the traditional cultural beliefs that perpetuates this GBV. I think cultural community silence also. So I think I'll wait for the next question before I share this part. Lastly, for me, will be the religious justification. And I think you've already mentioned that yourself, Joanna, when you were talking about Osinachi, where they are legitimizing life beating, calling it discipline. These are things that have been going on. So funny. Sometimes when I see something, I'll be like, why didn't this thing? Let them try it with people like us, You see something, I'll be like, God forbid, not that I'm praying for tragic incidents to happen, but you see where they're trying to chance somebody, and you see, I'm like, you people always know who to pick on. Come and try with people that would think, So like I saw one thing on the internet, a girl, I think the first time my husband slapped her, then she went behind to go and learn taekwondo or something, or black belt. And then the next time my husband tried it, she gave the man, they said the man did not even report it to anybody. Now they live in the house together. They've not addressed what happened, but there's this side in the house, like, that's it. So yes, those are some of the traditional beliefs. And if I'm to talk about the community initiatives, educational awareness campaign is one of it. Also engaging with the traditional and religious leaders, because we can't just be addressing, most times we face the people that we're trying to, I was about to say the survivors. Yeah, we face them. But what about because the people that are perpetuating the violence, we need to also, we also have to be our focus when we are engaging with this discussion. Because I remember when I went to Makoko to talk about bringing I Woman My Business to Makoko community. So they said, before I can do anything, I have to go and see the leaders, the traditional leaders. And I met a wall. They won't let me do anything. I know to get to where I need to do, because I can't just go in there and do we sat for hours. I talked and talked because they are the one perpetuating what we're talking about, right? Not to mention anybody's name, but so there's a way we have to be able to get agencies for these people. And how do we get agencies? It's by speaking to the religious and traditional leaders who are perpetuating them. If we can, so they have to be all parties have to be involved in this awareness, not just the survivors themselves. So I'll let Ellen.
BM. Ellen says religious leaders are a problem. Yeah, and most of the religious leaders, they are so cultural as well. Sometimes I think I'm like, our Nigerian pastors, when they come here, they'll be culture shocked. Like they will be culture shocked. Like, and they don't want to change in they're like, it's a tradition of our fathers, tradition of our ancestors, that kind of thing. So definitely there will be a role, except we use agencies like you said. BM, do you want to go ahead?
Just a very quick one, just so that I don't repeat, but just re-echo and re-emphasize some of the things you all have said. I'll just share this very personal story or example. So sometimes I actually got married in 2012, my first marriage. Well, not that I'm even married right now, but like in my previous relationship, that was like 10 years. And I remember so now this is something, well, let me share this, then I'll call out, the beliefs thing and how the community can step in and whatnot. So I was raised in a very religious, of course, family background is Muslim, and then eventually started going to church, mother converted to Christian and things like that. And so that new religion became the salvation religion, which in many cases is what happens when people go from one religion to another. And so everything that you see in that new religion is perfect. There is nothing that is ever wrong. And it can go the same way if someone is going from Christianity to Islam or other faiths. And so, because you don't want to ever feel that you have made a mistake in your calling or your faith or your salvation. And that becomes a big issue. Now, what really happened? I had this person whom I was with for over a decade, but there were two different incidents. The first one was a like a verbal exchange that led to this person saying, I'm going to report you to the pastor. And then we had the pastor who, now this is not to like cast any faith or make any religion look bad. So let me emphasize that in bold fonts, especially that this is a recorded conversation. And so this man of God then said in a meeting with me, closed door, that, do you know that you are not honoring God when you do not honor your husband? Do you know that he's the priest of your family and everything he says is right? And you should never challenge this person. Now, that indoctrination worked because for the most time in that relationship, I no longer was speaking up or saying anything. And this person was also so good at using religion and saying things to manipulate. Now, we didn't have a lot of physical incidents. And the reason I'm sharing this is, you see, it's complicated when it is mostly emotional abuse that leverages religious doctrines. And so it becomes difficult. You see, the survivors then are put in a box. And I'm not saying women survivors, now I'm saying survivors of any gender or sexuality. So it does put people in a box where, I don't understand, but I don't want to be an enemy of God. I love God. I want to serve God. And if this is what it means to serve God, because they also say to us that endure us suffering, because God endures it all. Even your Lord that you call Lord has endured everything before you. So who are you not to endure it all? Now, and for anyone who is spiritually minded, religiously grounded, it's difficult to separate yourself from such a powerful doctrine, from such a powerful belief. And I think I want to push back on something real quick. The idea that historically or inherently African systems have very much perpetuated patriarchy. I would say no. And I stand to be called out. I stand to be corrected in and out or after this conversation. And I'm happy to engage in, not in an intellectual battle, but in a research battle. And let's say, okay, if you don't believe me that African system was never inherently patriarchal, then let's do a research challenge together and be like, let's see what we find. And the reason I always go back to that is there's a reason patriarchy does not work inside. There's a reason in which religion has been used to push agenda. And this is not only a case in Nigeria. If you look at other African countries, think about Egypt. How has Egypt been portrayed in many in many religious canons, or even in history? And so when we begin to now look at all these different patterns, you see that when people then move from one place to another, we then take beliefs and beliefs and beliefs and beliefs from different spaces, and we take them and then we go to other spaces, they become ours. And so it's difficult to then say, oh, how then what are those beliefs really that are really African? Because in itself, it's so difficult now to say this is what the African beliefs are. When there's such a melting point, when Africa in itself has become a melting point of many beliefs that, honestly speaking, we can't even say which one was really indigenous to us. But that said, what can we do? There are many things we can do. And I think we should stop looking at the regular patterns. You see, when they say prepare for the storm, and you think that the storm is going to come this way, my shock here back on when the storm does not come that way and it comes in a different way. What do we know traditionally to be GBV. We need to first of all demystify what domestic violence is, what intimate partner violence is, or what even gender-based violence is. Because when we begin to mislead and misinform and misguide, even in the definition, in the construction, in the general notion of what this is, then we will be confused in developing solutions or methods for intervention at the community level, local, state, federal, national, or global. Because when we start throwing different terms around, these are all in the name of trying to just put everybody in confusion. Because honestly speaking, let's cut off these different terms and really narrow down to what are the core issues here. And from moving from the core issues, then we can say, okay, what are the areas that are often really never considered as a form of violence? And I love what Ms. Toyosi said about access to opportunities, or the fact that, widows' rights. These are the things, these are the unsung heroes, if I can quote and unquote say that. Lack of choice. Haven't you seen cases in marriages or in homes? No physical violence, no financial abuse. In fact, the partner provides everything. But guess what? The other person cannot make decisions, cannot do anything without that person saying, these are the things you need to do. Now that gets even more complicated. Or the cases where a woman continues to have to give birth because religious-wise, or the partner says, religion has said that you cannot have planned parenting, right? And when a parent or a woman is put in that situation, you see, the very general form of violence isn't the only reason why people are traumatized, right? Sometimes we don't even have to experience physical abuse before people say they are depressed or experience trauma. And so when there are structures and systems like this that institutions and religions have allowed to flourish, even when they don't look like the traditional, they don't have the traditional look or view of DV, then it's more difficult. And it's easy for what? Violence to escape. When there is no gunshot, no one is pointing a gun to your head, no one is beating you, no one is financially abusing you, but you even cannot make choices. You even cannot make decisions. You even cannot have access to opportunities. You even do not have a stake or a voice. You see, when a society has succeeded in these things that I've mentioned, it's easier for what the other vices and the very monster that we call domestic violence and other forms of it all to continue to exist. So if we must change beliefs, or my definition of belief really is that people don't have choices, that people don't have access to opportunities, that people's power have been taken from them. And of course, the fact that people's minds have been controlled by institutions and religions or religious practices. Those, for me, are the different ways in which I have seen this social menace manifest. And if we're going to address them, whether at the community level or at any level, we need to, first of all, simplify the problem. Simplification is the key. When we simplify a problem, it's easier to get solution. But when we further complicate the problem, we make it difficult for people to understand their problem, how much more be a part of the change or the solution. When you start giving it names and this and that, it's an agenda. It's for a purpose.
Thank you. Dr. Bernard, do you want to go? She wants to give a comment on this particular question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hello, ladies. Sorry.
Hi.
Thank you for letting me contribute to this very interesting and always timely and always current discussion. Never goes out of style. We can never discuss it enough. But I want to also be contribute as a scholar of Yoruba studies. And when I say Yoruba studies, I mean religion, I mean culture, I mean history, I mean sociology, I mean gender, My research is not that way. I kind of just go multi and transdisciplinary. If it work, I put it in my work. So let's start with patriarchy and the notion that women are meant to be subjugated in Yoruba culture. It's not true. And I'll tell you why. I'll give you the most basic example for why that is not true. If there is something that needs to be done, or if people need to do something bad to a person, they will ask for their mother's name, not their father's name. There is no culture where you will go and they will say, oh, what is your father's name? Because your connection, your maternal connection is more valid than your paternal connection. And I'll tell you why, because only a woman can tell who she's pregnant with, right? The father of her baby. So a man can think he has a sired children, but only a woman, well, unless the baby is changed, it's switched. I mean, you know you carry the pregnancy and you know you have a baby in your hand. So that connection lets you know that the Yorubas don't take for granted, and they are not unaware. And you can tell from history, you have very wealthy women. And women have always been very powerful in Yoruba culture until the advent of Christianity and Islam. And you will think that so assimilation, religious assimilation, cultural assimilation is what kind of made patriarchy big and kind of forces it on the Yoruba culture and the Yoruba way of thinking and the word sense and word view of it. Now, nothing you want to do. I mean, even polygamy and relationship in Yoruba culture, it's always like, oh, men can marry more than one woman. No, in Yoruba culture, women also have more than one husband, not one partner. I'm not saying partner, I'm saying recognized men that they are actually married to, that they have children with, and it's allowed until Christianity came and Islam came, and it became a taboo for women to have more than one partner, right? So many things that we consider African is not African. It's not Yoruba culture. There is no part of Yoruba culture or Yoruba belief system that allows a man to put his hands on a woman or that allows a woman to put his hands on a man. Gender-based violence, within the gender to a man or to a woman is not allowed because we don't talk enough about gender-based violence to men. Men also face a lot and they cannot talk about it because it's kind of emasculates them, right? They cannot talk about it. So men get raped, they get molested, they get sexual violence, but we don't talk about it enough because how dare you? You are lucky a woman is a woman has allowed you to have sex with you. No, if he doesn't want it, he doesn't want it. It doesn't make it better because he's a man. So we don't talk about, but what I wanted to talk about the fact that women, and I am going to be the devil's advocate now. In all my research, I would say that women are the problems of women, right? I don't know who mentioned widowhood and the rights of widow, the rights of widowhood in any culture. When a man dies and the woman is mourning, other men don't come and bother the wife. It is women that will come. I want to shave the head, want to shave the legs, want to shave the body, want her to drink water from that has been used to wash the cups. Men don't have the time for this. Women are the enforcers of these strange cultures that we say it's cultural. No, it's not. Patriarchy is I don't know, maybe we have been so I'm sorry, I'm a Yoruba scholar, so my English is very, very limited sometimes. So women have been so we have become biased to our own gender. You want to have access to some things, women will tell you that is not how it's done. I want to call you Mrs. And I'm like, no, I have a PhD. Don't call me a Mrs. They didn't give me this PhD because I was married or that I was married. They gave me this PhD because I worked my butt off. And they will say you are Dr. Mrs., but they will never call a man Dr. Mr. Is he not married? Or what is the difference? Is there a difference between my marriage and his marriage? Right? So, but you find that women enforce these things more. Other women, they're like, and when you say, they're like, oh, all you these feminists, all you these gender people, and I'm like, do you even know what feminist is about? Right? You can have a professor of 50 years who is a woman, and they will call her Mrs. all on top of all our accomplishments. And they will call a day-old male doctor, professor, because he's a man. They would reduce every accomplishment a woman has had to a marriage status. And no one would even ask if she's even in a marriage. And women are the enforcers of this thing. I was in a lecture one time, and a woman was talking about female genital mutilation. And she said something that actually, it's traumatized me till now. And what she said was that when these women are being caught, and she asked one of the people performing the cutting, why are you doing this? And you know what she said? This woman said, because a man is not going to perform it. There are women that are cutting women to reduce their sexual libido so that they don't perform at the same level as a man. Does that even make a sense to you? And she asked this question, and you know what the response was? That, well, men use their powers everywhere. This is the only place where we get to exercise our own power. I'm like, what the? Like, are you serious? This is a woman saying this to another woman. So when we talk about all this, I want us to also be very careful of what is cultural, what is religious. Yoruba culture and religion does not permit a lot of things were assimilated from the West
Western
into the
culture.
culture. Yes. And two, let's talk about what women are also doing to hurt other women. Men converge, women compete. To find a space for a woman, you will work your butt off. And when you get to that space and you have other women there, instead of you to converge, the women will be trying to join the boys' band against the woman. They will be trying to join the boys than to be with. I don't even understand how to explain it, but my experience and my scholarship has really, informed a lot of things I say to you. And it makes me see everything differently, even when it comes to the topic of respect. Well, thank you very much for letting me rant for so long. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We really enjoyed
I
your
enjoyed
thoughts.
that rant. So thank you.
Does anybody want to talk on this before we move to the next question?
I have a
Ellen.
question.
Okay, Teresi. Okay.
So
For Dr. Bernard?
yes.
Okay.
And also Miriam, because when I read Oyewunke's work about it, I agree. But then sometimes I realize that when we are generalizing or trying to like, oh, Yoruba, when we look at, let's start with the palace of a king, I'm not talking about Western now. I'm asking questions about our culture outside of the Western belief before Western or colonialism came. We only have one representative, which is all during, at least from what we've seen, there's always Yalode, just a woman, one, amongst men when making decisions. Though I recognize that the fact that they have a woman there shows that we have some sort of agency, but there is one, and the list of other Ashikpa, Otun, Osi, blah, blah, blah. That's my number one reason why when I was reading, because I know all of these theories and books, they sort of just put a stamp on it. But all I have to do when I'm looking at this thing, why I will ask those questions or want to disagree, is to ask that, can you answer to that? That to some level, there's no sort of imbalances in the way even the Yoruba culture, the structure is, within the systems. That's number one. Number two is the issue of name, because that's one thing I still haven't been able to. And I think that one came after Western anyway, but I feel like, why are we still not talking about it? Where the moment you marry, I have to take my husband, because I didn't want to take my husband's name. We fought, we went to counseling, we went to everything, and everybody still. So that's why even when I remove it, I still put it back. If we are having the conversation, why do we still taking out? Why are feminists taking their husband's name? Why even if you want to take it, I'm not even against it. It's not about the name. The problem is more than the name. But we forget that we are also still perpetuating some of these things. We use the big names, we use the terms. The terms is not even our problem. It's the solution, right? Like, what are we doing to solve these problems? But the name is one thing I've always been. Anytime I see Toyosi Morgan, there's something wrestling in my mind. I don't want to see Morgan. I want to see Tejumade, which is why even though I met a very misogynist fellow in the consular office that don't let me have my Tejumade or my passport and delayed me in Abuja till I missed my flight. And I had to now put the Morgan. But guess what? Everywhere I talk, I'll still put Tejumade in it. And I hope I'm still able. But why are women not having this? Because I feel like that's how generational wealth is even being taken from women. Because when you see Dara Durotoye, people know Durotoye, right? Bella has a name of his own. But Tara could have created another agency for our whole family, mother side or whatever. If she also has a name, continue. But now it's the Durotoye names that get into rooms, not Tara's middle name, even daughter. And I feel like those are the questions. That's the particular work I'm working on right now, because I feel like, well, even though some people have talked about it, why are we also not act like, but that's by the way, but the part of the Yoruba culture, I know, even, I don't want to throw shades to other tribe in Nigeria, but I know that in my culture, we have even in my people know I have a say. There was no patriarchy in my home. My husband comes to carry food and come and wash it, and we do all of that. So, but I feel like within those systems, we still see them. We can't just be generalizing that there is no, because so far that there is one woman in a room full of men, even though we still have agency, the agency is still limited compared to the role of man. And some cultures have more powerful women, but not all tribal cultures have the same thing, because there's something that is escaping me now. We know the likes of Efushoto and Aniwura. She was a female matriarch, and she had her slaves, she had everything. We know those history. I just feel like I don't just accept history because it was written by somebody. Sometimes I want to just, based on what I'm saying. There's also, even in the West, I say West, we have Margaret Epo. We have I recently did a piece on, I said, remove the slogan Margaret Thatcher. Stay tough like Margaret Ekpo. Let's start using our own slogans, our own, even in the Western space. So when I'm saying all these questions, not that I don't know the right one. It's just that I'm an activist that will query even the standard based on what I am seeing. And that's the question. That's what I was going to ask, based on what I've seen in even the Yoruba culture. Is the woman that will still live to the man's house. Although they will say there are some cultures that the woman can stay in her father's compound. We've seen all kinds of narrative, but yeah.
Can I come in real quick? I'll make mine quick because I want Dr. Bernard or Oluwabomi to really have time to talk about the Yoruba side. I want to take this name thing head on. And I don't have my passport on this table, but I'm proud to say that I took it upon myself after doing myself, redefining and saying, you know what, I can't be talking water and be drinking wine. I have to walk my talk. And so I went back to Nigeria this summer. Of course, very traumatizing experience to what? Change my identity from the beginning till the end. Before now, have been carrying the last name Yusuf. And then when I got married to my ex, I carried another Edo name. And when I went back to Nigeria, I said, I would never carry a Yusuf or a whatever. I'm going to carry all my names and name myself what I want to be named. Now, here is the first structural barrier that I encountered. I wanted them to have Miriam as the last name, which was unthinkable. And the first pushback was from the immigration department when they said, which one now? In fact, this was a chat between me and the immigration officer. Once you have their contact, it's easy for you to send your thing from the US or wherever you are. So in this chat, this person said, sent a forwarded message, and the message reads thus: which kind one be that one now? No. Why would she use Miriam? Is that not a woman's name?
Are you kidding me?
Now, do you know that I talked to my lawyer, and then my lawyer was like, why? Anybody can be any name now. In fact, let's pin that there. And then we went back, and then this guy, the immigration guy, was like, why don't you use Bisola as the last name? I was like, that's not what I want. But that would mean that Bisola Miriam, I would want people to say the two names together every time. So eventually, I had Bisola Miriam Abundance listed as my new name, with Bisola being the last name. And guess why they agreed to the change of name? Because for them, Bisola can be male or female. Yes. And now this is the interesting thing that I want to draw from this. We can beat the system. Honestly, we can walk around the system and beat the so-called FUCKING system. And honestly, this journey of changing my name, oh yes, I would say there were physical, emotional, and spiritual attack, forces trying to make sure that who are you to say that you want to rename yourself? And in fact, when I got to Nigeria and then I was there in person, I got those looks. And my fear, because I think everyone kept saying, you want to come back to the US, so you don't want to have issues with your I-20. My I-20 car, the name changed, the visa name changed, the passport name has changed. You don't know how proud, how happy that makes me feel, that I can walk into a room and say, see, I am, in fact, one of the reasons that I've not dated anybody as at now, and I'm saying this publicly, is because every time I'm having conversations with prospects, I'm saying, here are my deal breakers. Number one, I'm not fucking giving up my name, because I'm building a legacy and I'm standing in gap for many, many generations of women who believe that this is possible and they can take any name they want to. Just like you, the other gender, can take any name you want. And if you truly, truly love me and you're not subscribing to some systemic BS, then you would accept me no matter the name that I choose to carry. I made a post on my social media a couple of times where I said, it would be great for me to be called Dr. Bisola Miriam or Dr. Miriam or whatever. And I saw people in the comments, not just men, not just women, people of different gender, even in my DM saying, what are you trying to do? Don't you know that when you marry, a woman should give up her name? I say, Kamari, once beaten, twice shy. I'm trying to remember the Yoruba.
No, she enjoy your lẹ́ẹ̀mejì.
Exactly.
Am I right, Dr. Bernard?
I was like, no, this has come to stay. And honestly, for me, this is not because I just wanted to say FUCK to a man. No, I'm saying that I'm rewriting a narrative. I'm breaking systems and barriers. And if I truly want to honor the calling of God for my life, not caring what people have to say, I have to speak and walk and breathe this new life. And I said to all these fine boys, I say, see, I'm not going to change my name. And if we're going to have kids, the mistake that I've made before, we're co-naming these kids. Whether you like it or not, we are co-naming. And I started hearing, where Ibo ti gbọ́ pé wọ́n ti ń ṣerú ẹ̀. Ṣó mọ̀ pé ìwọ ni wọ́n ní kinní kan ìwọ abìkan kinní kan ní níbìkan àbí báwo náà ṣe máa ń sọ. At the end of the day, see, rules are created and rules can be broken. And humans, I repeat, we humans, we have superior intelligence over any systems, culture, belief, or whatever, and we can recreate our own patterns. And I said to myself, if a man says you love me, you honor the call of God for my life, you see me as that powerhouse that you want to build your life with, and you think that this old name thing is your reason for not wanting to be with me, wallahi, you don't deserve 1% of me, because I am going to be 1000% present for any man who would be able to it's not that you're giving up anything away. It is what
Yeah.
the society has made you believe. And if I'm going to attract someone, you have to be at the level of thinking at which I am. If you're still thinking small and thinking about these systemic beliefs, then we are not at the same intellectual level and you do not deserve me. So in me keeping my name, and even in the children we would have, they will carry our two, both of us. Let me say it that way. Our two, both of us name, because it is not taboo. This is not the first time people do this. It's just that what you don't know is what you don't know. And when people don't know something, when they hear it for the first time, it sounds strange. And I'm so glad that when I made that post, I'm saying this in conclusion, that there were men who were rooting for me and saying, why would you say that? I'm a feminist, you want to deal. There was a guy in the comment who said, Kofo Abayomi Street was named after a woman. So this is not the first person that would ever do this. And I think when our people perish for lack of knowledge, only for a mind that knows, it's a mind that is truly free. When we do our finding, our due diligence and our research, you will know that you are not if you do your research, you are not the first woman that would ever say, this is the name I want to carry. And you will not be the last. And if you do it, you are inviting other people to enter into that realization. Yes, it will be difficult. Yes, there was a risk. Maybe I would not be able to come back to the state. I was ready for that consequence. But at the end of the day, I came back and here I am. And I'm so fucking proud of it that, I can't wait for all those degrees that will carry my name to the glory of God.
Thank you. I'm glad to say my younger sister, she's getting married on Saturday and she's not taking her husband's name. Like she's taking her daddy's name, and I'm so proud of her. I wish I did that then, but I guess I didn't have like this enlightenment that I have now. But then for my kids, I gave both of my kids, I gave them their first names. Like I know they would say the mother doesn't like name the child, but I did that. I told my husband, he approved it, and at least I'm glad I did that. Over to you, Dr. Bernard.
Well, ladies, thank you for finding my ranting interesting enough to engage me. Thank you, Annie. You have raised a lot of salient questions and issues, and I'd like to start first I'll start with naming, because I just concluded a monograph on environmental sustainability that is currently being reviewed by Oxford University Press, and I had a subsection on naming and the politics of naming and how we use naming and how you can use naming to degrade and how you can actually use names to demean. And I'll take you to one SFR that tells you about how naming can actually be used to demean. And naming, right? So it's about it's Odu or Setu, I think, yes. So it's with Oshun and the 401 deities, and they were coming, and from Orun, and Orun is not heaven in Yoruba cosmology, right? Orun is the abode of spirit, it's not heaven. Yorubas don't have the concept of hell and heaven. So and so she was the only female amongst these deities, and when Olodumare charged them to go and make Aye very organized, sent one female with them, which is Oshun. And when they got there, they completely ignored her, right? After all, she's just a woman. And when they got back, and nothing was working for them, everything was this. We're multitask. We are. I don't know how we're wired that way. We can do 1 million things and we don't miss a beat. And so nothing was working for them. Men will forget their names it's easy if you can imagine, they will do it. So when nothing was working, they went back to Olodumare. Said, what happened? Where is the female that I sent with you? Why is she not in this meeting? And they said, oh, that she's just an ordinary female, and I'm going to stop there. So that's it. Calling her female is a fact, right? She is a female, but it is the context of use. It is the way it was used. It is the naming. It's the ordinariness of it, like that ordinary female, right? That one there. So it's the politics of naming. I want us to be also very so I'm using that Odu. I will use it for two things: for naming and for the discussion on how why we always have very few women in the company of men. So, and I would say, well, it's so before I go ahead, I would say it's in no ACC. So it's not it's in no ACC in Johnny Len. Yeah, so I wanted to correct that. Yeah. Then the secondly, also for me, naming, I would say, then I'll go back to my point again. It's very, very important. I was married before I got my PhD, but I would not have my name on my certificate changed because my mom paid for my degrees. I'm like, I'm thinking I'm having one name on all my degrees. I can take from head to toe. So all my 3 degrees have the person that paid the money for it, like, so I have my maiden name on, and I also wish that I had. My mom is educated, but you cannot remove what culture, because culture for us, we breathe culture. We were immersed in culture. So for us, it took a lot of us a long time before we started to realize that maybe no, this, and when I say culture, I don't really mean the Yoruba culture itself. I mean this culture we call Yoruba culture now. Because know that Yoruba culture has come in contact with millions of culture. So it has changed. This contemporary thing that we are now grappling with may not necessarily be how the Yorubas have always conceived these ideas of gender and of naming. Yorubas don't take, you don't take married name when you're married in Yoruba culture. No. You have your name and your mother's name, Omo Ajike Lagbaja, Omo Asunle. You take your mom's name because they can only trace you to your mother. No one can trace you to your father. So how can you take your father's name because like I said, men married, even when men started marrying, when it was becoming when the culture became polygamous for men will marry a lot of women. So now if you keep saying, and they have compound names, right? They used to have compound Orukagbole and Oriki and Orile. So if you had this compoundness of names or compound names, how do you now say I am the child of Akoni? They'll be like, which one? From which house? The question will be long. So when you say your Oluwabumi Oma Aduni, well, we don't have Aduni. We don't have personal Oriki where I come from Ondo side. So you never, if you get anybody Aduni, they are a miscultured person. We don't have that. But you understand my point. So naming, women never took men's name. No, they took their mother's name. It just continues. So you are married. It does not, name change was never. When women started going to church and it's still the same thing now. When we go to church, we say we are married, and we now said the original one, which is your parents giving you away, we call it engagement. And then we call the one where you go to church, where your pastor puts hands on you. We call that one church, the wedding itself. So if your parents are giving you away and you have not gone to church, people think you are not married yet. Because so you see how the culture has been changing, and so there's a bloodline between what is culture and what is believed to be culture. So name taking is very Western. And when I say Western, I don't know the origin of it, because even in the West too, until now, Kate is married to William. Is it William is married? Which one is it? Which one? Catherine is married to William, I think William. And Catherine has not taken William's name. Did you know that? She's still Kate Middleton. She's not going to become Kate Windsor tomorrow, because even in their own monarchical structure, you don't take your William's name. The Queen of England never took her husband's name. Never. It might as well just take her name anyway. But you see, so I don't know which culture. That's what I'm saying. I don't know which culture actually brought about women taking men's name, because even if you check history, we don't know where this comes from. So it's not Yoruba culture to take a man's name. It's just because we've assimilated other culture. Now, this representation of women in politics, see, there is this idea of women, and I think this is how I interpret it. It is not, Yorubas will say that it's not about how many teeth you have in your mouth. It is about the whiteness of the teeth. So women don't move in. We don't need the number. We already hold so much power. Power over life and death. When a woman tells you I'm pregnant, it's because most times she has chosen to keep that pregnancy. If she has not, she will not even talk about it. That is the beginning and the end of the child. Finish, right? So a woman so the power over life and death, women carry it in their bodies. And it's not because men don't contribute to it, but I'm saying that when you talk about a woman in a group, know that she's representing other women. There is court of Ajeh in Yoruba politics, and not the witches in the Western sense of it. The Ajeh, they are checks on kings. They serve as checks and balances on the political structure of Yoruba, on the market structure, on every when you take market and you take politics from a state, what else do you have? Nothing else. It crumbles on itself. So Iyalode, or you have the Olori. Most times in the Yoruba culture, the Oloris are always Ajeh.
Yeah.
So even when you think that the king, and before the king, in my culture, I'm from Ilorin. My parents are from Ilorin, so that means they're from Ilorin. Now we have Lobu. She's a female king. She's a woman king, sorry. And she is the one who installs the Jegun. So if there is a vacant seat for the Lobu and the king passes away, until the Lobu stool is filled, they cannot be a king. What does that tell? So what does that tell you about even the political structure of the town itself? So there are times that we have women. I'm not saying that numbers don't matter, but I'm saying that even the way I see the 401 deities ascending from On to Aye, and only one deity, only one female deity is with them. And she didn't do anything, and everything crumbles for them until she started participating in the matters, in the affairs. Everything became ordered. So the Yoruba, I guess the Yoruba just thought that women are too they are, maybe women are too valuable to just occupy, or just let us leave them. One is enough to handle all this 401 days. Just one woman is enough. And she handled herself well. So that's how I like to see it for me. I want more, of course, that is in the culture. It's a myth. But more female representation will also, but let me bring you to now. If a woman governor comes up today, look at America, right? If women, we have the largest number in the world. I think so. I would like to think so, because women there are a lot of us everywhere you go to. If you go to church, you see the women's section. It will be like two aisles, and the men's section will be one aisle. You will see that women we have the number. But if a woman pastor is preaching, women will be the ones that are saying why should the woman be on the pulpit? They will not support her. What is the first Clinton's wife? What's her name?
Hillary.
Hillary came up. She lost.
Same thing before.
This one that came up, she lost. If another one comes up again, because even women don't believe
sure.
in the struggles of women. So if we don't believe in our own struggles, why should they care? Why should they lose their own seat for us that we don't care for our own standing? So a lot of things that are happening for us, we are the ones who actually help them to encourage their patriarchy. Like continue to demean us, continue to be violent against us, continue to make pads. When they're talking about pads in the parliament, it is with men that are talking about how much they should be selling, how much tax they should be taxing, the pink tax. You know about the pink. It is men who talk about female and feminine products. Women are not there, because even women come out to say, vote for me. They will say, what can you do? Go and stay in your husband's house and take care of your children. So that's how I see it. I see that if we don't change and we are trying, right? I took my husband's name also, because I didn't know better. I mean, I wanted to be Mrs. Bernard, because that's what we were brought up to be. It's not my fault. I don't blame my mother for it. If she knew better, probably would not take my father's name too. But now that I know, I mean, I only have boys. I have boy children, and I'm like, I have a 10-year-old who is a special baby, he has Down syndrome, and I have a 7-year-old. That one is energy is too much. So, but when I'm in my house, you will think I have girl children, and I'm not saying there's gender role in my house, but they are my children. So I use them the way I would use them if they were girls. When I went to pound yam with better menstrual, like, hold it, go and do it, start pounding, because my mom, she did not train us, she did not bring us up as girls to pound yam. She said she would tell us it's a man's job. It's too forceful, it's too stressful. Let men do it. So I never grew up pounding yam. My brothers did that for us. So there were things that my mom did for us that also kind of encouraged us to be women for ourselves, as women, to be able to be strong, to not think that these roles are gendered and only preferred for us. So as women, I would think that the only way we can maybe start sorting these things is that let us start also changing the narratives around us. We are falling into a lot of errors because we didn't know better, but we can do better and we can make people around us better. And if things are not working the way we want, one of the things I've also learned is let us stop backing out. I do it a lot. If people are giving me to like calling me Mrs., I'm like, I back off. No, if we keep backing out, nothing will change. And that is if you are not saying no, you are saying yes. You have to say no and say it emphatically and say it until people, the only ones that are left around you are the ones who believe in what you're saying. If people are leaving you, it's because they are idiots. I'm sorry, I don't say it's because, or they don't understand you, and they are not people that they don't understand your struggle. And it will be lonely. It is lonely to be alone and to be alone shouting the shout, but you will eventually prevail. I'm prevailing in some places. I rather you call me Luabumi than call me Mrs. Bernard. I will throw every form of tantrum in this world. So I think that we are the ones, and when I see another person calling another female Mrs., and I know that she has a better, a title that is more preferable, I will fight for her. And if she now says, I'm also Mrs., I want to be daughter Mrs., and I'll be like, go and be your husband, but I will not be. I know people also have their choices, but you also have to help people understand that there are choices that can be wrong also, and that we have to help ourselves to grow as women and as females. And yeah, as hopefully we will get there. It's a gradual thing, but it's a lot of the sensitization and orientation that is needed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And this has been so insightful. I still have a lot of questions, but we're 2 hours past. So if any one of you have last minute comments, or questions, you can just go ahead to give it. Ellen, if you want to say something at this point. Okay.
I just want to add something. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. From the start of the root cause of domestic violence and the constraints that the survivors that they were facing, at the same time, the receiving end of what are the things that they will benefit from. So these are the issues that I feel that they are the ones that is causing the generation of this domestic violence. A lot of things have been done. People have been saying, doing the research over the years about what can be done, blah, 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 and all that. But the main thing is, when I was doing a mini research about this domestic violence, though I'm still working on it. And I was like, okay, probably the Nigerian system will be different from the United States. And I was shocked that when I was going through the statistics and all that, I was like, wow, this thing should be different. I was thinking that this is a developed country, unlike the African that we always believe that, okay, we have so much of cultural belief system and religious system that is part of the barriers that is not giving women this kind of chance to come out and be saying this. But here they were facing the same thing. And I was shocked. Assuming I have the old statistics, I would have given you the figures of what is happening here. But I don't have it right now. But the main thing I was looking at right now is that what is the solution? What are the things that could be done to assist the survivors of domestic violence? I have seen that so many organizations, they are working towards helping women during training about what they should do when this occurs. At the end of the day, that is not enough. The major constraint that many women that are facing this issue always have is, where will they go? If children are involved, okay, would this abuser enable them to take out their kids away? Some of these things were part of, and also the financial constraint. And from what I have seen so far, I've seen that majority of people that are involved, they are not financially independent. They always rely on their husband, what they could get from before they can make some of these decisions. So as a result, they have to, they find it very, very difficult to live the abuser. So following this, in the United States, I could say that there are lots of organizations that are coming in to assist the survivors of domestic violence. And part of the major issue is that they discover that many of these people, they're always looking at, they have no place to go. And if you look at the cost of housing, utilities, and all that, it is a major constraint for them. And they were like, since they are not financially okay, it will be so difficult for them to move from one place to another. Unlike the African countries where we have it back home in Nigeria, that we have to think, oh, I'm going back to my father's house. This person is going back to is going to the church and all that. They don't have such thing. And the government here, they were able to provide some kind of funding assistance to create some kind of transitional housing for many of these domestic violence survivors. But it is not enough. They are still having, some states are still having like higher rates of domestic violence. I'm only saying this not because, okay, probably I'm just trying to look at how the United States of America how they were handling their own domestic violence survivors. And probably we can relate this to the African system, though we know how our governments are doing a lot of things, and it's going to take a while before that can be done. So part of this, major of the houses that were being provided, they don't have enough facilities. They have the number of houses that were provided are very, very smaller compared to the number of women, children that are coming in. People, they don't have enough money to rent a house and lots of things. So my question now is, if the developed countries, they are facing this kind of things, what happened in the Nigerian system, the African system? How do we navigate from this? So for now, let me leave that. The research still continues and all that. So thank you very much.
BM, go ahead.
I want to be respectful of our time because we're definitely running really behind. I'll just share I made a couple of notes. So I want, first of all, Miss Miriam Balogun, I want to say thank you for bringing all that important data to this conversation. And I agree with you 1,000% because one, not only am I a survivor that, not only have I worked in the Nigerian space or within Africa, I have also worked with DV agencies in the city of Chicago in the last few years. And currently I have seen that, so just to put this in perspective, the United States, like many other countries where survivors are experiencing domestic violence, have not been able to successfully nip the social menace in the bud. So the US continues to have cases rising from time to time, the same way Nigeria, the same way Ghana, the same way Kenya, the same way Ivory Coast, and many other countries, Indonesia and the rest of the world. And in this summer, I visited some countries as well, and I also had the chance to speak with survivors. And just to also like buttress what you're saying and potentially maybe answer your question, is the fact that despite that these different countries and cultures are in these different contexts, survivors continue to experience, all survivors everywhere in the world need three critical things: safety, space or housing, and support. So wherever it is in the world, survivors need these three things. Now, the method or the approach for solving this problem, effectively leveraging just traditional systems, has never worked anywhere completely, whether in the United States or other parts of the world. Because even in the US that has a more structured systems, there is bureaucracy. There's a lot of paperwork. There are cases where someone will call and say, I need support. They would ask you, do you have kids? If you don't have kids, you can access certain support. And if you don't live within certain zip codes, you cannot get certain assistance. And if you don't carry a certain status, you don't get certain support. And I think that is where the research that we have done recently, and I'm not even trying to sell our solution, which I think I should, because I think it's such an innovative idea that we're developing. Survivors are everywhere. And if it is possible, not if it is possible, it is possible to leverage technology and a community-centered approach to solving this problem. How do we leverage technology and incorporate a community-centered approach? In systems where organizations or governments really do not work, there are everyday people that if there's a technology enhanced system or a software where, oh, for instance, we are working on a software that survivors everywhere in the world can use. I imagine that I, Bisola Miriam, I'm in danger. And by maybe I'm screaming out loud and my phone, the voice of my scream or whatever it is that I enter on my app can get the attention of people within 1 to 5 miles of where I'm living and send an alert, not to the police now, but to people within my locale that, hey, I need a place to sleep for the night. I need a couch. And I will tell you, when I moved to Chicago, I didn't know anybody. This is a framework that I've tested, even though I came into Chicago not in the name of a survivor, but as a graduate student. I have had people who stepped up and said, you know what, you can stay with me. And so there are ways in which these strategies can be deployed, but in a more structured, in a more refined way, leveraging software to where people can go into this app, for instance, and say, okay, I can find someone who is a landlord and is willing to allow me rent a place without tons of paperwork, without my credit score. And I think I want to echo something that everybody said about financial dependence. Actually, not in many cases. A lot of times, people have become bankrupt because of their abusers, not because they were even financially dependent on them. Imagine someone whose credit score was wrecked or has been wrecked because you have to constantly talk to a lawyer. And then every time you speak to a lawyer, you know how expensive that can be anywhere in the world. And there are many ways, or someone who lose their jobs or their source of livelihood. So it's not inherently it's not completely dependence on these abusers that put people in financial mess. It is even the other layers of issues. Lastly, let me add the point about where the whole paternal naming thing came from. I studied classics in my first degree and my first master's degree. And from what I found, the ancient Rome and Greek systems were inherently patriarchal, and mainly in the idea that the man's name, the man's family name, is the name that people take. So Claudius Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar is the name, but Claudius is the family name. So, the whole thing just continues to go, and then people keep taking that family name, and then they have the last name, the middle name, and the name. So there is the prenom, the cognom, and then the nomen. Prenomen, cognomen, cognomen is like the ancestral or the family name. So now, before we had English, there was the Greek language, then there was the Latin language, and then these English language is an offshoot of these other languages, and not just a language that gets shared or assimilated or transferred to places. The culture of the people who are connected to that language particularly. And if you do some study on even the North African region, particularly ancient Egypt, you see that country or that culture was primarily patriarchal, but again, in the name of trying to also sell a narrative. You see how Egypt is portrayed in many religions' canons. Egypt is demonized. You see how witchcraft is also demonized. There's a mission. And if you see in many religious canons, the prostitutes, who are the prostitutes? Mostly the woman. Who is the one who ate the forbidden fruits? The woman. And so culturally or religiously speaking, we are being indoctrinated without even knowing it. And there's something called articulation. Articulation is the idea that you're selling a narrative to people without brainwashing them. And you're using everyday things like, oh, just maybe you want to sell a product and you bring, okay, look at kids and the Colgate toothpaste, right? Have you guys seen that advert of kids with Colgate toothpaste? They're selling us the message of, with Colgate, you get this result without pushing ideas and really enforcing it. And so these things they have been done, they are still doing them, and they will continue to do them. And in order to also combat this pervasive, terrible narrative or narratologies that are completely engendering lives and perpetuating these social menaces, I believe a tool called social media, called technology, or whatever name it is possible to leverage it in rewriting narratives. We know what people did this last election, even in the US. Somebody bought a platform 2 years down the line, changed the name of the platform, sold ideology, and continued to sell that ideology up until the time that people became comfortable and used to accepting a particular candidate. Because see, it is possible to make anything look good or make anything look bad, as long as you can sell narratives and continue to push ideologies. So that said about name, demonization of, genders, and also I would say that technology can be used effectively to solve not just the problem of mind shifting or mindset re-engineering or reprogramming, but also very much how survivors can access safety, space, and support.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Ellen, do you want to say something? And Toyosi, do you want to say something?
No, I'm fine. Everything, all has been said already.
Okay. What of Toyosi?
The time is well spent. I'll just leave you with this storytelling technique questions that we can all go home with. So there are 3 scenarios. Number 1, there's a kid about 6 years old. She's walking down on the street crying, going home. You can see that her button is torn, her gown, and she's walking by different people. In that situation, what do you do as a person? Number 2, you're in a BRT bus. Some kids were chatting. They're really excited and just talking about what just happened outside. And then a man said, "Will you keep it down? Are you people jump, like, don't you have manners?" And what do? You are in that bus. You saw that happen. And you can see the faces of those boys, like the way they just crawl back into their skin. And then the last one, you see a man and a woman fighting. The man is obviously trying to, and then you say, okay, stop now. What are you doing that for? And the woman say, I beg, mind your What do you do? I'll leave you all with that. When is even the woman that says, what's your business?
You look on here.
Yeah. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you. And it's one thing I know we all like took out of this discussion is women supporting women. We shouldn't be the enemies of ourselves. Why now? We should. I know someone. She's a Nigerian, and she was like, "Oh, why would Kamala Harris? Why would she be contending for president? I mean, she should just go and sit down somewhere. Why would she be? I'm our own Nigerian. I'm like, are you kidding me? So I guess when we start supporting ourselves, our world will be a better place. I'm going to take a screenshot. Ellen, please, can you like put on your video? Then we will all say no excuse, and I will take a screenshot. Thank you. Okay. Can we say no excuse? Everyone, 1, 2, go.
No excuse. Oops. Let's start again. Sorry.
Okay. 1, 2, go.
No
excuse. Yeah, taken. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for coming. There's a poll at the end, but mainly for participant. Oh no, this poll is too long. This poll is too long. Well, this is mainly for participants. So if we can fill this before we go,
Okay.
yeah, I think it should like take time. Shouldn't take time, then they will just call it a day. And apologies for taking your time. But then it was such an insightful and engaging conversation.
Thank you for hosting, Joanna.
I'm happy to do that.
It was nice to meet you, Dr. Ellen and Bisola.
Same. I was gonna
And
say,
Dr.
if you guys
Bernard
are open
also.
And
to
Dr.
connect,
Bernard, yes.
I'm so
yes.
surprised you showed up. Like I'm like from where to where.
I mean, if you guys are open to connect, we can ask Mr. Toby to, share LinkedIn profile or something, so we can stay in touch.
Also, when conversations were going on about the name thing, I was like, we should ask Mr. Toby, how are you feeling on the outset? Just being amongst women talking about these things.
Well, yeah, that's a good one though. Yeah. Were you triggered at any point?
I'm not sure he's still on the call because I think he had
Okay.
another meeting, so he just told me like he stopped listening to us. I'm sure it's always all about gender equality too. But then I was like, maybe I should take my father's name, but we didn't like spend much time on the subjects. But I'm sure I wouldn't have like kicked against it. But maybe his parents would have like, hello, share. But I think this is something like everyone should keep doing, like in every sector, everyone keep having difficult conversations that no one wants to have. Okay, so are we done with the poll? I can end it if we're done.
Almost.
I don't know. I couldn't click. I don't.
So just scan the QR code. I just scanned the code and using my cell phone. So just, yeah, I think that's an easier way to.
If that is the case, can you resend the code? Because I couldn't feel the
And then I think Toby set it that way.
Let's see.
Thank you for having me.
Very much, please. I would like to join another meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for coming.
Bye.
Yeah.
Let me just relaunch.
Well, just didn't figure it out. It's
Ellen, you can just like get QR code and scan it with your phone.
Okay, scan.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, all done from my end. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Miriam, for
Hopefully
joining
we
us.
can, connect, and please do send us that lovely screenshots.
Of course, of course.
All right,
Of
then.
course.
Thank you, everyone. So
Thank
nice to
you.
meet you guys, and I would be stalking you all online.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.
Yeah,
Bye,
bye.
Bisala. Okay, bye, everyone. Thank
Bye.
you.
I don't even know where the end meeting is. Just end it from your end.
The one that looks like the.
I can't find it.
All right, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, I have to end. Leave. Okay.